As the ashes of World War II settled, casting long shadows over a world weary from years of conflict, a sinister undercurrent began to surface. The year is 1945, and the fall of the Third Reich has left in its wake a trail of notorious war criminals, scrambling like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Among these are names etched in infamy: Adolf Eichmann, Josef Mengele, Klaus Barbie, men responsible for unspeakable atrocities, now desperate to evade the justice that beckons them. This is the era of the Ratlines, clandestine escape routes weaving through Europe to far-flung destinations like Argentina, Syria, and Egypt. Orchestrated by networks of sympathizers and facilitated by organizations like the Vatican and the Red Cross, these routes served as a lifeline for those fleeing the noose of retribution. How did these notorious figures slip through the fingers of justice, and who were the shadowy figures aiding their flight? Amidst this murky backdrop emerges a relentless hunter, a beacon of justice in a world grappling with the horrors of the Holocaust. Simon Wiesenthal, himself a survivor of Nazi concentration camps, dedicates his life to tracking down those who orchestrated the genocide. His mission is not just one of retribution, but a crusade to ensure the world never forgets the atrocities committed. Wiesenthal's pursuit of justice sees the capture of key figures like Eichmann, the so-called architect of the Holocaust, snatched from his Argentinian hideout in 1960 and brought to trial. But the question lingers in the air like a persistent fog. How many more evaded capture, their crimes fading into the annals of history? As Anne Frank poignantly remarked, "What is done cannot be undone, but one can prevent it happening again." Are we ready to confront the uncomfortable truths of the post-war years, to explore the dark corridors of escape and evasion that allowed some of history's most heinous criminals to vanish into the night? Join us as we unravel the tangled web of the Ratlines, the tireless efforts of Simon Wiesenthal, and the haunting legacy of the Nazis who escaped justice. Welcome to the Diary of Julius Caesar. Echoes of Justice, the Nuremberg trials, and the reckoning of Nazi atrocities. In the wake of the devastating Second World War, a historic judicial event unfolded in the city of Nuremberg, Germany. The Nuremberg trials, held from November 20th, 1945 to October 1st, 1946, were a series of military tribunals that marked a pivotal moment in international law. This unprecedented series of trials prosecuted prominent leaders of Nazi Germany for heinous crimes that had shaken the conscience of humanity. The trials took place in the Palace of Justice, a location chosen for its symbolic significance and logistical suitability, despite being partially damaged during the war. The trials were conducted in 4 major categories: crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and a novel legal concept, the conspiracy to commit the aforementioned crimes. The defendants included high-ranking military officials, politicians, industrialists, and physicians, each accused of participating in the systematic murder of millions during the Holocaust and other war crimes. Among the accused were figures like Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Jodl, and Ernst Kaltenbrunner. 24 of the most prominent Nazis faced the International Military Tribunal, among them notorious figures like Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, and Joachim von Ribbentrop. The shadow of Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, and Joseph Goebbels loomed over the proceedings, although they had evaded justice through their self-inflicted demise in the war's final days. Göring, notably, was often vocal during the trials, defiantly defending the actions of the Nazi regime. The trials were a melting pot of legal traditions, blending elements of both Anglo-American and continental legal systems. The proceedings were translated simultaneously into English, French, Russian, and German, making it one of the first major trials with such a level of linguistic complexity. This linguistic feat was achieved through the use of innovative technology and a team of skilled interpreters. The prosecution presented a staggering amount of evidence, including harrowing witness testimonies and extensive documentary records. The world was introduced to the concept of genocide through these trials, with accounts of the systematic extermination of Jews, Romani people, and other groups. Films from liberated concentration camps showing the inhumane conditions and the scale of the atrocities left an indelible mark on the courtroom and those following the trials worldwide. Chief Prosecutor Robert H. Jackson famously stated, "The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored." One of the most significant outcomes was the establishment of the principles of the Nuremberg Code, a set of ethical guidelines for human experimentation. This was in response to the inhuman medical experiments conducted on prisoners by Nazi doctors, led by figures like Karl Brandt and Victor Brack. The Nuremberg Code laid the foundation for modern medical ethics and the protection of human subjects in research. Despite some criticisms regarding the trial's legal basis and claims of victor's justice, the Nuremberg trials were groundbreaking in establishing that individuals, and not just states, could be held accountable for war crimes. They set a precedent for future international trials, including those for war crimes in Yugoslavia and Rwanda. Telford Taylor, an American prosecutor at the trials, emphasized their historical significance, stating that 4 great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason. The trials did not just prosecute, they also exonerated. The acquittal of Hans Fritzsche and Franz von Papen, among others, demonstrated that the tribunals were more than mere instruments of vengeance. They were forums of justice. This aspect of the trials was vital in establishing their legitimacy and adherence to the principles of law and fairness. As Justice Jackson poignantly stated, "The record on which we judge these defendants is the record on which history will judge us tomorrow." The shadows of yesterday, unraveling the Odessa network and Ratlines. In the aftermath of World War II, as the world grappled with the revelations of the Holocaust and the devastation of war, a clandestine network was actively operating, aiding in the escape of Nazi war criminals. This covert operation, known as the Odessa Network and Ratlines, was a complex web of routes and contacts that facilitated the flight of Nazis from Europe to South America and beyond. Estimates suggest that thousands of Nazis managed to escape via these networks, though the exact number remains uncertain. The term Odessa, an acronym for Organisation der ehemaligen SS-Angehörigen, Organization of Former SS Members, was believed to have been established by former members of the SS, the elite corps of the Nazi Party. This shadowy organization was said to have been formed with the intent of creating a sanctuary for fugitive Nazis, a place where they could evade justice and perhaps even plot a resurgence. The exact founding date of Odessa is unknown, but it is believed to have been operational by 1946. Simultaneously, the Ratlines, a network of escape routes, extended like a spider's web across Europe, leading to safe havens in countries like Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. These routes were aided by a motley crew of collaborators, including sympathetic clergy members, former fascists, and even some foreign government officials. Notable among these was Bishop Alois Hudal, a Catholic bishop based in Rome, who is alleged to have assisted numerous Nazis in their escape. One of the most infamous figures to have escaped through these networks was Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust. Eichmann was spirited away to Argentina, where he lived under a pseudonym until his dramatic capture by Israeli Mossad agents in 1960. His capture and subsequent trial in Jerusalem brought international attention to the issue of Nazi fugitives. Another notorious fugitive was Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death, infamous for his inhumane medical experiments at Auschwitz. Mengele found refuge in South America, eluding capture for the rest of his life. He lived in Brazil under the alias Wolfgang Gerhard and died in 1979, his true identity discovered only after his death. The Ratlines operated through various means, from forged documents and passports to discreet transport arrangements. The routes often originated in the chaos of post-war Europe, threading through countries like Austria and Italy. The Vatican has been a subject of controversy in this context, with allegations of its involvement, though this remains a matter of debate and conjecture. The involvement of figures like Hudol and others associated with the Vatican has been documented, but the extent of institutional involvement is still unclear. The most popular destination for these fugitives was Argentina, under the presidency of Juan Perón, who, driven by a mix of pragmatic and ideological reasons, welcomed many former Nazis. Brazil, Paraguay, and other South American countries also became refugees for these individuals. Perón's regime, sympathetic to fascist ideologies, provided an ideal haven for Nazis seeking to rebuild their lives away from Europe. The Ratlines and Odessa network not only facilitated the escape of war criminals, but also highlighted the complex geopolitical realities of the post-war world. The onset of the Cold War saw former Nazis being courted by the West and the East for their intelligence and expertise, further complicating efforts to bring them to justice. This geopolitical maneuvering sometimes took precedence over the pursuit of justice for war crimes. The impact of these networks extends beyond the historical and into the cultural realm. They have inspired numerous books, films, and conspiracy theories, underscoring the enduring fascination and horror with this dark chapter of history. Works like Frederick Forsyth's novel The Odessa File and the film adaptation have brought the story of these networks to a wider audience. Shadows and Rockets, the controversial saga of Operation Paperclip. As the ashes of World War II settled, a covert operation unfolded, not on the battlefields, but in the hushed corridors of power. Operation Paperclip, a secretive and morally ambiguous chapter in post-war history, began. Its mission, to recruit Germany's most brilliant scientific minds for America's benefit during the burgeoning Cold War. Officially approved by President Harry Truman in August 1945, the operation marked a dramatic shift in post-war policy, prioritizing scientific gain over denazification efforts. Initiated by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency in 1945, Operation Paperclip aimed to leverage the scientific advancements of Nazi Germany, particularly in aerospace and rocketry. In the cloak and dagger world of post-war espionage and scientific rivalry, these German scientists, some of whom were former Nazis, were seen as crucial assets in countering the Soviet threat. The GOA, under the leadership of individuals like Major General Hugh Nur, maneuvered through a moral minefield, balancing the exigencies of the Cold War with the dark histories of their recruits. The operation's name, Paperclip, derived from the paperclips used to attach the scientists' new profiles to their Nazi Party membership and SS affiliations, effectively sanitizing their pasts. This act of expunging or overlooking their Nazi histories was a pragmatic yet controversial decision, driven by the strategic imperatives of the Cold War. The GIOA often found itself in a delicate position, facing scrutiny from both governmental and public sources. Over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip, a move that had profound implications for the US space and defense programs. Among the most notable was Werner von Braun, a former member of the SS and the technical mastermind behind the V-2 rocket program, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile used against Allied forces. Von Braun's journey from Peenemünde, the site of his wartime research, to a pivotal role in the American space program epitomizes the operation's complex legacy. Von Braun and his team were initially stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas, where they worked on rocket technology for the US Army. Their expertise played a critical role in developing the Redstone rocket, which propelled the first live nuclear ballistic missile and later launched America's first satellite, Explorer 1, marking a pivotal moment in the space race. This marked a significant turnaround from the days of Operation Crossbow, where Allied forces targeted V-2 production sites. The operation extended beyond rocketry. Hubertus Strughold, known as the father of space medicine, was another high-profile recruit. Despite later allegations of war crimes related to human experimentation, Strughold made significant contributions to the US Air Force's aerospace medicine program. His work was crucial in preparing American astronauts for the conditions of space, although his legacy remains tainted by his past associations. Operation Paperclip was not without its critics. The ethical implications of employing former Nazis, some of whom were implicated in war atrocities, sparked debates within the US government and among the public. The operation raised profound questions about the balance between moral accountability and strategic necessity. Critics like Senator J. William Fulbright argued against employing individuals with dubious pasts, emphasizing the moral cost of such decisions. The impact of these German scientists on US technology was undeniable. Their work was instrumental in the development of the Saturn V rocket, which ultimately enabled the Apollo moon landings. Von Braun, in particular, became a prominent figure in NASA, serving as the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center and becoming a symbol of the US's space ambitions. His legacy, however, is a dichotomy of scientific achievement and complicity in wartime atrocities, but the shadows of their past never fully disappeared. Throughout their careers in the United States, these scientists carried with them the complexities and contradictions of their earlier affiliations and actions. Operation Paperclip remains a nuanced and contentious chapter in history, embodying the Cold War era's moral ambiguities and strategic calculations. The operation, shrouded in secrecy and moral controversy, continues to provoke debate and reflection on the price of technological and scientific advancement. As historian Clarence Lasby commented, Operation Paperclip was a strange marriage of convenience between the American government and a group of German rocket experts in which both sides used each other to their own best advantage. Erasing shadows, the complex journey of Germany's denazification. In the ruins of post-war Germany, a monumental and unprecedented task unfolded: the denazification process. This ambitious program, launched in 1945, aimed to purge German society, culture, press, economy, judiciary, and politics of any remnants of the National Socialist ideology. Initiated by the Allied forces, denazification was a cornerstone in the reconstruction of a democratic German society. Its objective was not only to eliminate Nazi influence, but also to foster a democratic consciousness among the German people. As the Allied forces divided Germany into 4 occupational zones, each zone approached denazification with varying intensity and methodologies. The United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union all sought to eradicate the influence of the Nazi Party and rehabilitate German society, but differed in their strategies and focus. The American zone implemented the most comprehensive denazification program, while the Soviet zone used the process to establish a communist foothold. The American zone witnessed the most vigorous denazification efforts. The US authorities established a program that required Germans to fill out Fragebogen, questionnaires, to determine their level of involvement with the Nazi regime. Over 13 million Germans underwent this screening process, creating a massive administrative task. This method, however, was criticized for being both overly bureaucratic and superficial, often failing to discern genuine Nazi sympathizers from mere joiners of convenience. The British zone focused more on rebuilding civil society and less on punitive measures, resulting in a less rigorous denazification process. In contrast, the French zone's approach to denazification was inconsistently applied, often overshadowed by concerns of security and reconstruction. The Soviet zone pursued a more severe approach, often utilizing denazification as a means of removing potential opposition to communist ideologies. One of the most notable aspects of the denazification process was the Nuremberg trials, which began in November 1945. These trials, where major war criminals were prosecuted, brought international attention to the horrors of the Nazi regime. Beyond these high-profile trials, however, lay the vast and complex task of cleansing the German bureaucracy, educational system, and every aspect of daily life from Nazi influence. In the immediate post-war years, thousands of Nazis were removed from their positions, and many were imprisoned. Yet, as the Cold War intensified, the Western Allies' focus shifted from denazification to rebuilding Germany as a bulwark against communism. This shift resulted in a gradual relaxation of denazification efforts and the reintegration of many former Nazis into German society, especially in areas where their expertise was indispensable. An often overlooked aspect of denazification was its cultural dimension. The Allies banned Nazi books, films, music and symbols, attempting to eradicate the cultural imprint of the regime. Schools were purged of Nazi teachers and textbooks, and a massive re-education program was implemented to instill democratic values in the German populace. The US even sponsored films like The Hitler Gang, 1944, and Our Job in Germany, 1945, to educate Germans about the dangers of Nazism. Despite these efforts, the process had its shortcomings. Many former Nazis managed to evade justice by concealing their pasts or benefiting from the Allies' changing priorities. The question of how deeply Nazism had penetrated German society remained a subject of debate, with some arguing that the process failed to reach the deeper societal roots of Nazi ideology. The legacy of denazification is complex. On the one hand, it was a crucial step in dismantling the totalitarian structures of the Nazi regime and laying the groundwork for the Federal Republic of Germany's democratic institutions. On the other, its inconsistencies and eventual dilution left many Germans feeling that justice had not been fully served. As historian James F. Tent observed, denazification was a necessary response to the crimes of the Third Reich, but its execution was often flawed and incomplete. Between mercy and complicity, the controversial role of the Vatican and the Red Cross in Nazi escapes. In the labyrinthine aftermath of World War II, amidst the chaos and the relief of peace, a shadowy narrative unfolded involving two of the world's most respected institutions, the Vatican and the International Red Cross. Their alleged roles in aiding Nazi war criminals to evade justice have been a subject of intense historical scrutiny and moral debate. The end of the war saw many high-ranking Nazi officials and collaborators scrambling to escape the Allied dragnet. It was during this tumultuous period that certain channels within the Vatican and the Red Cross reportedly became part of what would later be known as the Ratlines, covert escape routes for Nazis. Records indicate that up to 8,000 members of the SS and other Nazis escaped through these ratlines. The Vatican, a sovereign entity in the heart of Rome, was in a unique position during this period. While officially neutral during the war, its post-war policies and attitudes towards fleeing Nazis have been a subject of controversy. Some historians suggest that certain members within the Vatican hierarchy sympathized with the anti-communist stance of many Nazis and, motivated by this and the chaos of post-war Europe, facilitated their escape. One of the most notable cases linked to the Vatican ratlines was that of Franz Stangl, the commandant of Treblinka extermination camp. He reportedly received help from a Roman Catholic bishop to flee to Syria and then Brazil. Similarly, Bishop Alois Hudal, a recognized Nazi sympathizer, was often cited as a key figure in assisting Nazi fugitives, though the extent of his involvement and the Vatican's official stance remain debated topics. Hudal himself once said, "I thank God that he allowed me to visit the prisons and bring comfort to many inmates." On the other hand, the International Red Cross, renowned for its humanitarian efforts, found itself embroiled in a controversy of a different nature. In the chaos following the war, the Red Cross issued travel documents and identity papers to thousands of refugees. It has been alleged that this system was exploited by Nazis, who managed to obtain these documents under false identities, facilitating their escape, particularly to South America. Among the beneficiaries of such documents was Adolf Eichmann, who obtained a Red Cross passport under the name Ricardo Clement and fled to Argentina. The ease with which Eichmann and others like him managed to exploit the Red Cross's humanitarian mechanisms highlighted the challenges facing international organizations in times of upheaval. Both the Vatican and the Red Cross, in their respective capacities, faced immense challenges in the post-war period. The Vatican was navigating the complex political landscape of a war-torn Europe, while the Red Cross was dealing with an unprecedented refugee crisis. However, their alleged involvement in assisting Nazi fugitives posed serious ethical and moral questions. The debate over their roles is further complicated by the lack of concrete evidence in many cases. The secretive nature of the Ratlines and the passage of time have made it difficult to ascertain the full extent of the involvement of these institutions. However, the accusations and suspicions have lingered, casting a long shadow over their post-war history. While the Vatican and the Red Cross have since taken steps to address these allegations and have been involved in numerous humanitarian efforts worldwide, the narrative of their possible involvement in aiding Nazi escapes remains a poignant reminder of the complex moral dilemmas faced by institutions in times of crisis. In the shadows of retribution, the tireless crusade of Simon Wiesenthal. Amidst the post-World War II landscape, a singular figure emerged as a symbol of justice and relentless pursuit. Simon Wiesenthal, a man whose name became synonymous with the hunt for Nazi war criminals. His journey from Holocaust survivor to the world's most renowned Nazi hunter is a tale of resilience, tenacity, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Born in 1908 in Bucsak, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Wiesenthal's life took a catastrophic turn during the Holocaust. He survived multiple concentration camps, including Janowska, Plazow, and Mauthausen, but lost 89 family members to the Nazi genocide. This personal tragedy fueled his post-war mission to track down and bring to justice those responsible for the Holocaust. Wiesenthal's quest began in the ruins of Mauthausen. With the war barely over, he compiled a list of SS officers and collaborators, kickstarting his lifelong mission. His approach combined meticulous research, an extensive network of informants, and an uncanny ability to connect disparate pieces of information. One of Wiesenthal's most significant achievements was aiding in the capture of Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust. In 1953, Wiesenthal received information that Eichmann was in Argentina. His relentless pursuit and the dossier he compiled were instrumental in Eichmann's eventual capture by Israeli Mossad agents in 1960 and his subsequent trial and execution. Another notable success was the capture of Franz Stangl, the commandant of the Treblinka and Sobibor extermination camps. Stangl, responsible for the deaths of nearly 900,000 people, was apprehended in Brazil in 1967, largely due to Wiesenthal's efforts. Wiesenthal's work was not without controversy. His single-minded pursuit of justice sometimes put him at odds with governments and other Jewish organizations. Critics questioned his methods and the accuracy of some of his claims, yet his commitment remained unshaken. As Wiesenthal famously said, "For me, there is no statute of limitations for murder. My work is a warning to the murderers of tomorrow that they will never rest." Operating from a small, cluttered office in Vienna, Wiesenthal's name became a beacon of hope for Holocaust survivors seeking justice. His Simon Wiesenthal Center, established in 1977 in Los Angeles, continues his legacy, promoting human rights and Holocaust education worldwide. By the time of his death in 2005, Wiesenthal had been involved in the identification and capture of over 1,100 Nazi war criminals. His life's work was a testament to the power of an individual's resolve in the face of monumental injustice. Beyond the numbers and the high-profile cases, Wiesenthal's legacy is also found in the lesser-known stories. He often spoke of the moral duty to remember the victims and the importance of justice over vengeance. His pursuit was not just about retribution, it was a quest to uphold the sanctity of human life and dignity. The echoes of a dark past, tracing former Nazis in post-war political arenas. In the aftermath of World War II, as the Allied powers sought to rebuild a shattered Germany, an uncomfortable truth emerged. Many individuals who had been part of the Nazi regime found their way into positions of influence in the newly formed democratic governments, particularly in West Germany. This phenomenon, a complex interplay of necessity, pragmatism, and overlooked pasts, became a significant aspect of post-war European politics. It's estimated that by 1957, about 77% of the Justice Ministry's senior officials were former Nazis. The process of denazification, initially rigorous, gradually lost its intensity, especially in the face of the emerging Cold War. The Western Allies, primarily the United States and Britain, shifted their focus from punishing former Nazis to establishing a stable and prosperous West Germany as a bulwark against communism. This shift in priorities paved the way for many ex-Nazis to reintegrate into civilian life and even ascend to positions of power. By the early 1950s, less than 200 Nazis had been incarcerated for war crimes. One notable example was Hans Globke, who served as the Chief of Staff to West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer from 1953 to 1963. Globke had played a significant role in drafting the Nuremberg laws, the legal framework that institutionalized racial discrimination in Nazi Germany. Despite his past, Globke became a key figure in the West German government, influencing its direction during the critical years of the Cold War. His influence was such that Adenauer once remarked, "I'll take my Globke over your general any day." Another example was Kurt Georg Kiesinger, who became Chancellor of West Germany in 1966. Kiesinger had been a member of the Nazi Party and worked in the foreign ministry during the war. His past membership became a subject of public debate and protest, particularly during the student movements of the 1960s. This culminated in the infamous incident in 1968 when Beate Klaasfeld publicly slapped him, calling him a Nazi. In the realm of science and technology, former Nazis also found roles in the new government structures. Werner von Braun, an SS officer and the brain behind the V2 rocket program, was brought to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip and eventually became a prominent figure in NASA. His story exemplifies how wartime expertise was often valued over moral accountability in the Cold War context. Von Braun once remarked, "We knew that we had created a new means of warfare, and the question as to what nation, to what victorious nation, we were willing to entrust this brainchild of ours was a moral decision more than anything else." The situation in West Germany was reflective of a broader trend in Europe, where many former Nazis managed to avoid prosecution and reintegrate into society. This reintegration was facilitated in part by the chaotic post-war environment, where records were lost or destroyed, and the sheer scale of involvement in the Nazi regime made thorough vetting impractical. For instance, in Austria, a 1948 report noted that nearly 60% of bureaucrats were former Nazis. The presence of former Nazis in post-war governments was not just a political issue, but also a moral and ethical dilemma. It raised questions about the nature of justice and the process of reconciliation. The philosopher Hannah Arendt, commenting on the trial of Adolf Eichmann, highlighted the banality of evil, pointing out how ordinary individuals could become complicit in horrific crimes. This observation was starkly relevant in the context of former Nazis holding government positions. The legacy of this period is complex. On the one hand, the integration of former Nazis into post-war governments can be seen as a pragmatic necessity for rebuilding a devastated nation. On the other, it represents a troubling compromise, where the quest for stability and anti-communist alliances overshadowed the pursuit of justice for the crimes of the Nazi era. In the shadow of infamy, the burdened legacies of Nazi families. The aftermath of World War II left a unique and often painful legacy for the families of prominent Nazi officials. These families grappled with a profound and complex burden, a mixture of guilt, shame, confusion, and at times defiance, as they navigated life in the shadow of their infamous relatives. The stories of these families provide a human dimension to the repercussions of the Nazi regime's atrocities. One striking example is the family of Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust. His daughter, Gudrun Burwitz, born in 1929, remained a controversial figure throughout her life, never publicly renouncing her father or his actions. Instead, she became involved in Stille Hilfe, an organization known for supporting arrested, condemned, or fugitive former SS members. Burwitz's life exemplifies the complicated, often unresolved relationship some Nazi descendants had with their family's past. She steadfastly defended her father, stating in a rare interview, "What he did was done for Germany." On the other end of the spectrum is the family of Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command. His daughter, Edda Göring, born in 1938, lived much of her life under the scrutiny and stigma of her father's actions. She maintained a low profile, rarely speaking about her father in public, and lived with the constant reminder of her family's dark legacy. In a rare comment, Edda mentioned that she loved her father, but she struggled with the reality of his role in the Nazi regime. The family of Rudolf Hoss, the commandant of Auschwitz, faced a different journey. His son, Rainer Hoss, born in 1965, became an outspoken critic of his grandfather's actions, dedicating his life to educating young people about the dangers of hatred and extremism. In a poignant symbol of reconciliation, Rainer even visited Auschwitz, standing as a stark counterpoint to his grandfather's horrific legacy. Rainer said in an interview, "I have to live with the fact that he was my grandfather, but I decided not to be his grandson." The descendants of Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, also grappled with a complex legacy. Harold Quandt, 1921-1967, Goebbels' stepson from his wife Magda's previous marriage, became a successful industrialist after the war. Unlike many Nazi families, the Quandts managed to retain much of their wealth and influence, though they seldom spoke publicly about their ties to Goebbels. The Quandt family, which held substantial stakes in BMW and other companies, faced scrutiny much later, with a 2007 German documentary highlighting their use of forced labor during the war. Perhaps one of the most compelling stories is that of Nicholas Frank, the son of Hans Frank, the Governor-General of occupied Poland. Nicholas has been unflinchingly critical of his father, describing him as a deplorable fanatic of Hitler, and has spent much of his life denouncing his father's crimes and the Nazi regime. He famously wrote a book titled Der Vater, eine Abrechnung, The Father, a Settling of Accounts, where he confronted his father's legacy head-on. These families' experiences varied widely, with some choosing to confront the past head-on, while others preferred to live in its shadow, rarely acknowledging the historical burden they carried. Some, like Bettina Göring, the great niece of Hermann Göring, chose to distance themselves physically and psychologically from their legacy, with Bettina even undergoing sterilization, citing a desire not to propagate the Göring bloodline. She reflected on her decision, saying, "I had my tubes tied at the age of 30 because I feared I might create another monster." This generational saga of Nazi families is not just a footnote in history. It is a testament to the long and often painful shadow that such dark legacies cast over families. It speaks to the complex human emotions of guilt, shame, denial, and at times a deep sense of responsibility to right the wrongs of the past. Shadows in the Desert, the untold story of Nazis in the Middle East. In the tumultuous aftermath of World War II, as the world sought to rebuild and reckon with the horrors of the past, a lesser-known chapter unfolded in the Middle East. This region, far from the epicenters of the conflict, became an unlikely refuge for some members of the Nazi regime. The story of these individuals, who found sanctuary and even roles in Middle Eastern countries, is a complex intersection of geopolitics, ideology, and the enduring legacy of Nazism. One of the most notable figures in this narrative was Alois Brunner, a close associate of Adolf Eichmann and a key architect of the Holocaust. Brunner found his way to Syria, where he reportedly advised the government on security and interrogation techniques. Despite numerous attempts to locate and extradite him, Brunner eluded capture, living in Damascus under the pseudonym Dr. Georg Fischer. His presence in Syria was an open secret, and he is believed to have played a role in the brutal suppression of dissent in the country. Brunner's survival in Syria, often rumored but never officially confirmed, remained a source of frustration for Nazi hunters, with the Simon Wiesenthal Center stating that he was one of the most important Nazi war criminals. Another infamous Nazi who made his way to the Middle East was Johann von Leers, a prominent Nazi propagandist. After converting to Islam, he assumed the name Omar Amin and moved to Egypt, where he found employment under Gamal Abdel Nasser's regime. Von Leers used his expertise in propaganda to assist Nasser's government, particularly in its anti-Israel and anti-Zionist rhetoric. His transformation from a propagator of Nazi ideology to a voice in Nasser's regime marked a peculiar twist in his ideological journey. The case of Franz Rademacher, a former Foreign Office official responsible for Jewish affairs in Nazi Germany, is also significant. After fleeing Germany, Rademacher briefly found refuge in Syria and later in Egypt, where he continued to espouse his anti-Semitic beliefs. Rademacher's story, however, ended in 1962 when he was arrested in Syria and extradited to Germany, where he faced trial for his war crimes. These individuals were part of a broader pattern where Middle Eastern countries, primarily Egypt and Syria, provided sanctuary to former Nazis. This phenomenon can partly be explained by the geopolitical landscape of the time. In the early years of the Cold War, the Middle East was a region of strategic importance, and the former Nazis' expertise in military, intelligence, and propaganda was valuable to governments seeking to bolster their power and counter perceived threats, particularly from Israel and Western-aligned nations. The motivations for Middle Eastern countries to shelter these individuals were varied. In some cases, it was driven by a shared hostility towards Zionism and Israel. For others, it was the practical advantage of utilizing the skills and knowledge of these experienced officials and operatives. Egypt, for instance, under Nasser, was known to employ several former Nazis in its military and intelligence sectors, leveraging their expertise in its conflicts with Israel. The presence of former Nazis in the Middle East was not without controversy. It was a source of tension in international relations, particularly with Israel and Jewish organizations that sought to bring these war criminals to justice. The reluctance or refusal of some Middle Eastern governments to extradite these individuals was often cited as a point of contention. The stories of these Nazis in the Middle East also underscore the complex and often murky nature of international justice. While some, like Eichmann, were eventually captured and brought to trial, others like Brunner and von Leers evaded justice, protected by the very geopolitics that had once made them powerful. The uneven pursuit of these individuals reflected the intricate and often contradictory nature of post-war geopolitics. The legacy of these former Nazis in the Middle East is a reminder of the far-reaching impacts of the Second World War and the Holocaust. It reveals how the tentacles of this global conflict extended far beyond Europe, influencing politics and society in distant regions. Restoring history, the arduous journey of Nazi-era art and asset recovery. In the shadow of the horrific atrocities committed by the Nazis, an extensive and complex effort has been underway for decades. The recovery and restitution of art and assets looted during the Second World War. This monumental task of returning stolen items to their rightful owners or their descendants is not just a matter of legal and financial significance, but also a crucial step in healing the deep wounds inflicted by the Nazi regime. It's estimated that over 600,000 paintings were stolen during this period, and the efforts to recover these continue to this day. The scale of Nazi plunder was staggering. It is estimated that the Nazis looted approximately 20% of Europe's art during the war, including paintings, sculptures, and other valuable cultural artifacts. This systematic looting was part of their broader campaign of oppression and genocide, particularly targeting Jewish families and institutions. For instance, the Rothschild family lost a significant part of their extensive art collection to Nazi looting. One of the most emblematic cases of art recovery involves the famous Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer-Thirst by Gustav Klimt. The painting was stolen from the Bloch-Bauer family by the Nazis in 1941. It wasn't until 2006, after a lengthy legal battle, that Maria Altmann, the niece of Adele Bloch-Bauer, succeeded in reclaiming this masterpiece, which was subsequently sold for $135 million. Altmann's struggle was later dramatized in the 2015 film Woman in Gold, bringing wider public attention to the issue of art restitution. Her case was pivotal in opening doors for many similar claims. The journey of recovery is fraught with legal and bureaucratic challenges. Many artworks found their way into museums and private collections, often with little documentation to trace their origins. The Washington Conference Principles on Nazi-Confiscated Art, established in 1998, was a significant step forward, providing guidelines for the identification and restitution of looted art. However, implementation has been uneven, with some institutions more willing than others to investigate the provenance of their collections and return items when appropriate. The 2013 discovery of the Munich art hoard, over 1,500 works held by Cornelius Gurlitt, the son of a Nazi-era art dealer, reiterated the vast scale of the issue. The discovery of the Gurlitt Trove in 2012, a collection of over 1,400 artworks found in the apartment of Cornelius Gurlitt, the son of a Nazi-era art dealer, highlighted the ongoing challenges of art restitution. This discovery led to the establishment of the German Lost Art Foundation, dedicated to researching the origins of art suspected of being looted by the Nazis. The trove included works by Picasso, Matisse, and Dix, among others. Asset recovery extends beyond artwork to include a wide range of property and valuables. The Jewish Restitution Successor Organization was established to help recover Jewish property in Germany that had no identifiable heirs. Similarly, the Claims Conference has worked tirelessly to secure compensation for Holocaust survivors and their heirs, distributing over $70 billion in compensation since 1952. The emotional impact of these restitution efforts cannot be overstated. For many families, the return of a painting or a piece of property is a powerful symbol of justice and a tangible link to a past that was violently disrupted. It's not just about the monetary value of these items, but about honoring the memory of those who suffered under the Nazi regime. Despite these efforts, thousands of artworks and significant amounts of property remain unaccounted for. The ongoing search and legal battles highlight the complexity of addressing the wrongs of the past. For many survivors and their families, the fight for restitution is a painful reminder of the loss and trauma they endured. In one notable anecdote, when The Actor by Picasso was returned to the heirs of a German Jewish banker from whom it had been seized, one family member remarked, "This painting is a symbol of our family's resilience in the face of immense adversity." The persistent shadow, tracing the legacy of Nazi ideology in Neo-Nazism. Decades after the fall of the Third Reich, the toxic legacy of Nazi ideology continues to cast a long, dark shadow across the globe. The emergence and persistence of neo-Nazi groups represent a disturbing continuity of the hateful and supremacist doctrines that propelled Hitler's regime. These groups, though varied in their organization and influence, share a common thread in their reverence for Nazi principles and their perpetuation of racial hatred and anti-Semitism. As of the late 2010s, reports suggest there are hundreds of neo-Nazi groups operating worldwide, with tens of thousands of members collectively. The roots of neo-Nazism can be traced back to the post-World War II era, a period marked by tumult and ideological vacuum in parts of Europe. Initially, these groups were comprised of former Nazi officials and sympathizers who could not reconcile with Germany's defeat and the discrediting of Nazi beliefs. Over time, neo-Nazi ideology began to appeal to new generations, evolving to adapt to contemporary contexts while retaining its core tenets of racial purity, anti-Semitism, and authoritarianism. In the 1950s and 1960s, countries like the United States and the United Kingdom witnessed the formation of such groups, echoing the rhetoric of racial superiority and national renewal. One of the earliest and most infamous neo-Nazi groups was the American Nazi Party, founded in 1959 by George Lincoln Rockwell. Rockwell's organization, despite its marginal status, gained notoriety for its provocative rallies and unabashed promotion of Nazi ideals. Rockwell, often donning a uniform reminiscent of the SS, infamously declared, "We must have a pure white America or perish." His assassination in 1967 did little to dampen the movement's spread. In Europe, the resurgence of far-right ideologies saw the formation of groups like the UK's National Front, founded in 1967, and Germany's National Democratic Party, established in 1964. These groups, though not always explicitly identifying as neo-Nazi, espoused key aspects of Nazi ideology, including ultranationalism, xenophobia, and racial segregation. The NPD, for instance, faced numerous legal challenges in Germany due to its ideological proximity to the Nazi Party. Its rallies and propaganda efforts often sparked significant public outcry and counter-protests. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 and the subsequent social and economic upheaval in Eastern Europe provided fertile ground for the resurgence of neo-Nazi ideologies. Groups like Russia's Russian National Unity, founded in 1990 by Alexander Barkashov, who often appeared in uniforms emulating the Hitler Youth, gained a following. These groups capitalized on the social unrest and economic hardships, blaming minorities and promoting ultra-nationalist sentiments. By the early 2000s, Russia had become a hub for neo-Nazi activities, with several violent incidents attributed to these groups. The internet age has given neo-Nazi groups a powerful tool for propaganda and recruitment. Websites, online forums, and social media have allowed these groups to disseminate their ideologies more widely and covertly. This digital propagation has led to a worrying trend of global interconnectedness among neo-Nazi factions, transcending national boundaries and creating a diffuse, international network of adherents. Online platforms have been used to coordinate events, spread propaganda, and even recruit members globally. Despite efforts to combat the spread of neo-Nazi groups, challenges persist. The elusive and often decentralized nature of these groups makes them difficult to monitor and counteract effectively. Moreover, the broader social and political issues, such as economic disparity and immigration, which often fuel far-right sentiments, add layers of complexity to addressing this problem. Governments and law enforcement agencies worldwide have been grappling with the challenge of balancing freedom of speech with the need to curtail hate speech and prevent violence. In the face of these challenges, various governments and international organizations have intensified efforts to counteract neo-Nazi ideologies. Educational programs, legal measures, and counter-radicalization initiatives have been implemented in an attempt to stem the tide of neo-Nazi influence. In Germany, for example, extensive education about the Holocaust and the dangers of far-right extremism is part of the curriculum in an effort to inoculate younger generations against these ideologies. Unraveling minds, understanding the psychology behind the Nazi phenomenon, the rise of the Nazi regime and its ability to enlist the support of ordinary people in its horrifically destructive agenda remains one of the most perplexing and studied aspects of modern history. Psychological and sociological research has delved deep into the mindset of those who were part of this regime, seeking to understand how seemingly average individuals could become agents in one of history's most brutal chapters. The Nuremberg trials post, World War II, which brought Nazi war criminals to justice, first spotlighted this question, leaving the world pondering how civilized people turned into perpetrators of unspeakable atrocities. The foundation of this research can be traced back to the immediate post-war period. Notable among early studies is the authoritarian personality, 1950, developed by Theodor Adorno and other researchers. They proposed that a particular personality type, characterized by rigid conventionality, submission to authority, and hostility towards outgroups, was more susceptible to fascist ideologies. This theory suggested that certain personality traits could predispose individuals to extremist beliefs. Adorno famously said, "The fascist agitator is usually a master of the spoken word." Another landmark study was Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the early 1960s. Milgram sought to understand how ordinary people could be compelled to commit acts of cruelty under authority. His findings revealed that a significant number of participants were willing to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks to others when instructed by an authority figure. Milgram's conclusion that ordinary people are likely to follow orders given by an authority figure, even to the extent of killing an innocent human being, has profound implications for understanding the behavior of individuals within the Nazi regime. Milgram observed, "Ordinary people simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility on their part can become agents in a terribly destructive process." In the realm of sociology, the work of Hannah Arendt, particularly her concept of the banality of evil, as explored in her book Eichmann in Jerusalem, A Report on the Banality of Evil, 1963, brought a new perspective. Arendt's study of Adolf Eichmann, a key architect of the Holocaust, portrayed him not as a fanatical ideologue, but as a startlingly ordinary individual who performed atrocities simply as part of his job. This idea suggested that the capacity for evil could be more mundane and common than previously thought. Arendt famously stated, "The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil." The Milgram experiments and Arendt's theory have been subject to various criticisms and reinterpretations over the years. Some scholars argue that these theories underestimate the role of ideological commitment in the actions of the Nazis. Others point to the influence of a highly militaristic and nationalistic culture in pre-war Germany, which conditioned individuals to conform and obey. Researchers like Christopher Browning in his book Ordinary Men, which examined the actions of a Nazi police unit in Poland, provided insights into how ordinary individuals became complicit in the Holocaust. Recent research has expanded to include neuroscientific perspectives, examining how brain function and structure might influence susceptibility to extremist beliefs. Studies involving brain imaging have suggested that individuals with extreme beliefs may exhibit different patterns of brain activity when processing information or making decisions, although this field is still in its infancy. These studies aim to understand the neurological basis behind susceptibility to extremist ideologies. Group dynamics also play a crucial role in understanding the Nazi phenomenon. The concept of groupthink, where the desire for harmony in a decision-making group overrides a realistic appraisal of alternatives, is seen as a significant factor in how Nazi policies could be widely accepted and executed without critical opposition. The social identity theory, which posits that people derive part of their identity from their group affiliations, can also help explain the strong in-group loyalty and out-group hostility exhibited by the Nazis. This theory suggests that the Nazi emphasis on Aryan identity and the demonization of Jews and other minorities played a crucial role in fostering group cohesion and obedience. These studies collectively suggest that the Nazi regime's success in mobilizing ordinary people was not solely the result of individual psychopathology or a uniquely German cultural flaw. Rather, it was a complex interaction of personality traits, social influences, cultural factors, and situational pressures that made the Nazi regime possible. Understanding the psychological and sociological underpinnings of the Nazi regime is more than an academic exercise. It serves as a crucial reminder of the potential for evil in all societies. It underscores the importance of vigilance against authoritarianism and the need for critical thinking and moral courage in the face of destructive ideologies. As society continues to grapple with the lessons of the past, these insights remain vital in preventing the recurrence of such a dark chapter in human history. In this journey through history, we've witnessed the transformation of post-war Germany, the moral dilemmas of Operation Paperclip, the enigmatic tales of the Odessa network, and the enduring efforts to restore stolen art and dignity to victims. Each thread of this narrative, woven into the fabric of time, serves as a testament to humanity's resilience and its unyielding pursuit of justice. As we reflect on these events, we're reminded of the poignant words of Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate, who said, "For the dead and the living, we must bear witness." This journey through the fate of the Nazis post-World War II underscores the importance of remembering and bearing witness to history, not only to honor those who suffered, but also to ensure that such darkness does not find its way back into our world.